Hello YouTube. So I just realised that my video, The Cult of Social Justice Part 17, has been blocked in the US and Canada due to two video clips I used. One was the trailer for one of the Purge movies, which I just had in the background. Strange that that would be blocked, but, you know, it is what it is. And the other clip was of a woman giving a man a white feather. You'll see the significance of that later on if you haven't watched this on Bitchute or whatever. Apparently that clip is from Downtown Abbey. I've never watched that show, but because of that I think it's blocked in Canada. So this is a quick re-edit. 99% of this is exactly the same. I'm just going to block out those two video clips and then re-upload it. Of course, if you ever see one of my videos is being blocked in your country, feel free to go and watch it on Bitchute. Anyway, without any further delay, take it away, Bane. Hello YouTube, Bane666 here. So, last episode in this series, I covered some clips from the Q&A episode with the panel of angry, violent feminists, and you'll see what I mean in this episode if you missed that last one. But I do recommend you go and watch that last episode if you haven't seen it, because we learnt a lot. We learnt a great deal. We learnt the world is run by a white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy, which is systematically oppressing anyone who isn't a white male. And that the only issue that white males face is they don't know how great scented candles are, which is, you know, obviously a very, very important issue. We also learnt that the police should be abolished because I'm sure that won't lead to disorder in any way, will it? And we learnt that a drunken Aboriginal woman put into a drunk tank by the police who fell over and injured her head and then later died wasn't in fact an accident or caused by the fact that she was drunk. No, those police beat her to death, even though the CCTV footage shows otherwise. But that's not important. They're police and probably were white, and she was Aboriginal, so definitely beat her to death despite the facts. And apparently this is something that happens every day or something. So I think we learned a lot, but you know, we didn't go through all the clips, and some of the best ones are yet to come. I've saved the juicier ones for this episode. So without any further delay, let's get stuck into it.
Thanks, Fran. When trying to bring about significant change, when is aggression and violence a better option than assertiveness, strong arguments, and modelling the behaviour you expect of others?
Ashton? When none of that other stuff works.
Now, I tend to agree with this answer, although I do need to clarify that. I think if you're living in a third world dictatorship where the rights of the citizens are constantly oppressed and anyone who speaks out against the government is put in jail and there is no free speech, there is no opportunity to vote out a government or to express views differing from that government, then yeah, violence might be your only choice. Now that's not a good choice because usually it leads to total fucking chaos afterwards, and the person who's thrown out of government is often replaced by someone just as bad or someone even worse. But under those circumstances, yes, you may need to resort to violence to make a change. That's not the way it is in the Western world though. Despite what some women on this panel think, okay, we are not living in a third world dictatorship, okay? We all have the right to vote. We can disagree with the government without going to jail, although, you know, you can't teach your pug to do a Nazi salute, but you can still disagree with the government, at least. And we can all express our opinions on social media or on the street corner or to our neighbours and friends and family or whatever, at least to some degree. There are definitely certain people, social justice warriors, trying to stop that and try to outlaw free speech and free thought and suppress differing opinions, you know, because they'd like us to become a third world dictatorship, it seems. But for the moment at least, we have those abilities. We can protest. We can organise events, which hopefully won't be shut down by SJWs. We can make videos like this one, even though YouTube has been unsubscribing people from my channel for years and has stopped sending people notifications. But apart from that, I can still publish this video and there will still be at least some people who will see it. So we don't need a violent revolution in the streets, despite what Antifa might think. Now, is the system perfect? No, it's not. But no system is perfect. And it's much more productive to work within the system and try to change it, rather than burn it all to the ground and start again, which, once again, some of the women on this panel would like to do. That's just going to get a lot of people killed. They don't seem to mind because I think they think the people being killed are white males, so it won't matter, right? Let's continue.
It's as simple as that?
Yep. I have a great answer for this that a lot of people do not like. I want patriarchy to fear feminism. And there is a chapter in my book on violence. There is a chapter on my book about white women who voted for Trump and white women who accept crumbs from patriarchy because they allow their whiteness to trump their gender. I'm fully aware of this. But at the end of the day, even those white women have to recognize that nothing protects them from patriarchy. Nothing. For me, as a feminist, the most important thing is to destroy patriarchy. And all of this talk about how if you talk about violence, you're just becoming like the men.
Becoming like the men, I see, because only men do violence, right? That's something which is a male characteristic alone. Women never do violence, except when it's justifiable, right? Okay.
My question, so your question is a really important one, but I'm going to answer it with another question. How long must we wait for men and boys to stop murdering us, to stop beating us, and to stop raping us?
Men and boys. Okay. Now, look, it's bad enough that she associates these traits with males in general, right? With men, adult men. But she also has to associate them with boys. Because, you know, we all know that there are many, many 5-year-old rape gangs going around, raping, beating, and murdering women. It's on the news every day, which is a surprise because we live in the patriarchy. You would think it would, oppress such news, but it's just a matter of fact that these 5-year-old boys, just don't respect women. Must have been taught that by their fathers, obviously. Yeah. This doesn't sound like anti-male ramblings at all, does it?
How many rapists must we kill? Not the state, because I disagree with the death penalty, and I want to get rid of incarceration, and I'm with you on the police. So, I want women themselves. As a woman, I'm asking, how many rapists must we kill until men stop raping us?
Okay, so let me get this straight, right? She wants to get rid of the police, abolish the police, get rid of the legal system, and get rid of incarceration and the death penalty. But she wants women, presumably mobs of women, to murder rapists. What could go wrong with that, right? Nothing like a bit of mob justice. I mean, it worked in the South years ago, right? Whenever a white woman accused a black man of raping her, I guess she wouldn't have any problem with that, though, would she? I guess she wouldn't have any problem with that. Oh, but hold on. That was whites doing it to blacks, so therefore it's racist. It's so we can't do that. Better only do it to white men then. Yeah. But I have to ask the question, who would determine who is guilty of rape once you've done away with the legal system, and due process and all those other things that kind of are important for society to function? Who would determine which of the accused are guilty of rape? Now, that's a silly question, right? Because if a woman accuses a man of rape, he must be guilty. So we'll just have mobs going around murdering anyone who's accused. As long as it's not a white person accusing a black person, because that would be racist. We can't have that, right? If it's a black woman accusing a white man, that's okay. Or a white woman accusing a white man, or a black woman accusing a black man, all perfectly fine. But the white woman accusing a black man would be racism. Even though women never ever lie about rape, ever, it still would be racism somehow. This is really confusing. Social justice is really confusing, because everything is racism, but at the same time, women never lie. So, yeah, how do you determine what's happened in a case where a white woman accuses a black man? I guess it's the fault of white men somehow, in some way.
In Mexico, there are brightly printed signs hung everywhere with warnings like, "Thief, if we catch you, we'll lynch you." But in the village of Acatlán de Osorio, no one dares say those words anymore. Two simple crosses are a reminder of what happened here on the 29th of August 2018. Ricardo and his uncle Alberto were taken to the local police station for drinking alcohol in public. Soon, a rumour spread like fire through the village. These two men had been kidnapping children. Within minutes, a mob forced its way into the police station. This is how they died, beaten and then burned alive. Dozens of people filmed it on their phones, like a concert. In Mexico, 98% of crimes go unpunished, so people take justice into their own hands. Angry crowds act as judge, jury, and executioner.
Yes, I saw them when they brought them here. But I didn't do anything. I heard people say they'd been stealing children. Down there, people called to us to help the parents of those children. But the parents never materialized.
Sociologist Elisa Godínez has seen the phenomenon spread in this era of social media.
Before smartphones, images from lynchings didn't get shared around. And most importantly, there were no social networks to spread rumors on. We have to remember that rumors are a key factor behind lynchings.
Ricardo was a law student. His mother Maria had been working in the United States for several years and watched on her phone as her son was killed.
On Facebook.
They broadcast it live on Facebook. People from here filmed everything. And then the next day, everyone realized that they were innocent. When I saw it happening live, I wrote, "Don't kill them. That's my son." But I was in Baltimore in the US.
Now Maria has to live alongside her son's killers for as long as the case lasts. And the family's lawyer is preparing for a long and difficult trial.
I wouldn't call it a lynching because in judicial terms, it's a homicide.
A murder carried out by hundreds of people.
There were so many people. The ones who paid for the gasoline, the ones who dragged them along the ground, the ones who hit them, the ones who spat on them. So many guilty people.
When a whole town is guilty, getting justice is complicated. Caught in the heat of the moment, those involved might justify their violence. But when the cold facts of what they did become clear, no one wants to speak up. So far, almost no lynchings in Mexico have led to convictions.
And that is exactly why we have a legal system with due process rights as opposed to mob justice. Next.
One of them's fighting words. Spectator Australia is already saying Mona's promoting violence. That's what you're doing?
Well, what I'm doing is I'm saying that violence has been owned by the state. That violence has been given by the state to its police. That violence has been allowed to continue unchecked, mostly, by men, especially privileged men. So exactly how long do I have to wait to be safe?
Okay,
and when I say to
Murray,
be safe,
Murray,
there's a
what do you-
hierarchy of safety too. Obviously, people of colour, disabled people, etc.
Murray,
It amazes me that she thinks that somehow having a version of the Purge, which goes 365 days a year, is going to make her safer. And she, of course, also ignores the fact that most victims of violence in society are, in fact, male. Not female, but male. As I've pointed out in the last video in this series, as well as numerous other videos, women are 10 times more likely to die by their own hand, by committing suicide, than be killed by an intimate partner. In other words, women are far more dangerous to themselves than men are to women.
What do you think of that answer? How do you feel about this?
I guess there's two things. One is there's a lot of smashing and destroying.
Yes.
But what's the alternative? So
the alternative is a world where I'm not raped and murdered.
The alternative is a world where I'm not raped and murdered. Well, you know, I think that is an excellent point she has made here. A very, very good point, considering she's been raped and murdered at least 10 times. And that's just this week. I mean, it's just relentless. The patriarchy never sleeps. But seriously, which do you think is more productive? The 1963 Civil Rights March on Washington?
Let freedom ring, and when this happens, when we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Or the 1992 LA riots.
Come on. That's not right! That's not right! It's not right what y'all doing! I came from the ghetto too! Same as all of you did! Y'all need to listen! But you know, y'all mess up my business! And you call it black power! You mad the white man! Why destroy my business? Why destroy my truck? Why steal my computer? I'm trying to make it. Could you understand that? Can't y'all see it? I'm trying to make it. Just start listening. I gotta do my job. Hey, man, why you doing this in your community, man? These clothes belong to some of your neighbors. No. You don't care? I don't care. Why? I mean, but how can you explain this, man? Is this gonna solve anything?
Which do you think is the better model to get change? Because it's pretty clear that a lot of the members on this feminist panel want the 1992 LA riots as the norm.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. That's a good start. The other thing is, too, if you think about bullying begets bullies. So violence begets violence is what I'm seeing. So
well, let me bring Jess in on that, about the, violence begets violence.
Well, it's interesting. I think if anyone's shocked by what Mona's suggesting, you just have to look back to history and a certain faction of the suffragettes in the early 20th century. They used violence. They thought what they were fighting was a civil war between the sexes. They smashed windows. That one suffragette actually went up to a young Winston Churchill in 1909 and whipped him with a horsewhip at a railway station. I mean, there was... Someone likes that. Winston Churchill did a lot of shitty things. That was, for a faction, a violent movement. And the only thing that stopped their militancy was World War One. If it hadn't been for World War One, there's no telling what might have happened, because they were fighting for their lives.
No, they weren't fighting for their lives. The young men who went off to World War One were fighting for their lives. Literally fighting for their lives, and in many cases giving their lives to protect those same women. And those men who didn't give their lives often came back broken And it's those same suffragettes that she's talking about, which often shamed men into joining the military by giving them a white feather, including some men who were too young to enlist or had already been to the front lines and come back either on leave or because they were discharged due to injuries. And they also lobbied to institute an involuntary draft of men. And this included men who did not have the right to vote at the time. So these brave feminists fighting for women's right to live were also fighting for the right for men to be drafted in a war which they had no say in and didn't even have a vote. I mean, that's equality for you, right? But it's interesting because the red-headed panel member, the lunatic one, the more lunatic one, seems to think that violence is only something that men do. But here we have an example of another panel member telling us that the early suffragettes were actually very violent, which would contradict what the other panel member was saying, wouldn't it? Oh, but this is justifiable violence. That's right, because whenever women do violence, it's justifiable, and whenever men do violence, it's not justifiable, right? And that way you can only categorise men as being violent. Yeah. It doesn't seem like it's rigged at all.
One was violence. One is violence by men against men.
Violence of men against men. Yes, men defending their home, defending the women, comfortably staying at home, shaming men into going off and dying for them. And if we look at one recent study, it turns out that between 1480 and 1913, European queens were 27 times more likely to wage war than kings. Of course, they didn't go on the battlefield themselves. They sent off men to die in their names. And most of those men didn't do it voluntarily.
Hang on 1 second, let's have...
It's never the ideal. It's never the first thing to go to. But, slave rebellions. I mean, there are many causes where people have resorted to violence as a way to finally break through and get heard and achieve what we need. And if that's what it takes, that's what it takes.
If I can just jump in, Mona. So I'm thinking, I just want to bring this conversation back to the land that we're on, Australia, whatever. We live in a colonial state, and I think for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, we are living in a constant state of duress. We experience violence from so many different types of systems. We experience it interpersonally. When you say violence begets violence, there's something it's almost sounding like it's like a level playing field, which it's not. It's absolutely not. So I think if you're defending yourself, then I think I'm surprised. I wonder what our kind of tipping point in Australia is going to be when people are going to start burning stuff.
Does she realise that she's on national television and that she has no opposition there to counteract anything she's saying, no matter how crazy it may be? There's no voice of sanity. There's no counter voice whatsoever. Yet her solution is to burn things. Even though she has this massive platform and she could be influencing people and enlightening people, no, the solution is to burn things. So basically, she wants the LA riots as opposed to Martin Luther King.
I look forward to it.
Mary's question was when is it better offer than assertiveness, strong arguments and modelling the behaviour you expect of others?
I think, who's that bloody quote, appealing to your oppressor?
Assata Shakur. It's throughout history, no one has ever gotten their right or their freedom by appealing to the moral sense of their oppressor.
That is, of course, assuming that women are an oppressed class, which they're not. And it's easy to prove that women are not an oppressed class. Once again, let's go back to World War I, 100 years ago, supposedly at the height of female oppression, where female suffragettes shamed males into going off and fighting in the war to protect them. Now, can you name another oppressed group throughout history which has shamed their oppressors into going and defending them? Do you think the black slaves 150 years ago were able to shame their owners into defending them, into going off and risking their lives for them? Probably not. That probably never happened. I don't think that version of history ever happened. So if women were actually oppressed and men were the evil oppressors that these women claim they were, or still are, how would the oppressed group shame them into going off to war? With a fucking feather, of all things.
It's fascinating for me that men constantly ask, oh, you don't want to become like us, you know,
Okay,
so don't use violence.
Let's know to finish.
So I'm thinking about, in a colony, we live in a colony. Like, we've tried for 230 plus years to appeal to the colonisers' morality, which just doesn't seem to exist. So I think violence is okay. Because, if someone's trying to kill you, there's no amount of, oh, but I'm really clever, I'm really articulate. No amount of that is going to save you. So
It's a tricky
stuff.
I think that's a really good.
Yeah, I don't think you have to worry about anyone thinking you're clever, or anyone on this panel for that matter. So now that we've learnt the best way to change society is just to burn it down and have mob justice, let's go on and see what they say in another clip.
Former US President Barack Obama recently said that people who are politically woke need to get over themselves because they're just being judgmental online and not affecting any change. For many women and gender diverse people of color, online is one of the few safe spaces to actually speak out about injustices within our community and more broadly.
Do you think she realises that she's talking to a panel of woke feminists who are on a national TV show with absolutely no opposition? Because that kind of defeats the argument that the only place woke people have to go and be heard is on Twitter or Facebook or whatever. Now, someone might say, but Bain, she's talking about the average person. Yeah, okay, fair point. But how's that any different than anyone else? Your average white male doesn't have a national TV show to talk to the nation on, does he? It's no different than for anyone else. And ironically, the group of people who try to censor that platform that anyone can use to express any opinion, be it good or bad or whatever, the group of people trying to censor that more than any other group of people are those woke feminists. They're trying to turn what is effectively a universal platform into an echo chamber.
What effect do you think that Mr. Obama's words have on these already marginalized voices, and what would you say in response?
Yes, marginalised voices, like the ones on this panel, who have been given a platform to put forward violent and crazy fucking ideas with no opposition. Now, could you imagine Q&A ever having a panel of MRAs, just MRAs, with absolutely no opposition whatsoever, to just talk about MRA issues? I mean, we wouldn't be coming out with crazy shit like we're hearing on this show. But could you imagine that happening? That would never happen.
Mona?
I completely and utterly disagree with Barack Obama.
Me too.
I go online exactly to tell people to fuck off when they attack me.
Okay, I gotta say, telling someone to fuck off when they attack you is perfectly reasonable. Now, I'm not saying that is the best thing to do, but it's understandable. And I'll get to that in a minute. But first of all, I want to deal with the when they attack you point, because I have a sneaking suspicion the way she defines being attacked would be different than what a normal person would define being attacked. Now, I could be wrong, but based on what I've seen on this show, I suspect that disagreeing with her would be deemed an attack. And I also have to ask the question, if she attacks someone, would she be okay with them telling her to fuck off? Or would she say that was outrageous, and would she claim she's just being targeted because she's female and a woman of colour or whatever. Now, back to telling someone to fuck off not being the best method. I have to say, I think the best way to deal with someone who is attacking you is to remain calm and to ask them simple questions. Now, I don't spend a lot of time on Twitter because it's the shithole of the internet and it's just filled with idiot SJWs who you can't have a reasonable conversation with. Some of them you can, but most of them are just unreasonable idiots. But when you have seen me on Twitter, you'll see that I remain calm and just ask them simple questions. They'll make a claim about all MRAs, and I'll simply ask, why do you think that? Usually they'll just be abusive or block me, or they'll, post me a link to Return of Kings or something like that. The typical shit. But it's amazing how you can disarm someone if you just ask them simple questions. Why do you think that? Do you have any evidence to support your claim? Things like that. And you'll soon find that these people don't have anything to back up their claim. They don't have anything but abuse or blocking you so they can remain in their echo chamber. And when they do that, that's when you point it out to everyone else. However, if you just tell them to fuck off, it becomes a pointless shouting match. Although, admittedly, on occasion I've been so frustrated that I have told people to fuck off. But, I'm only human. And on rare occasions you do find someone who is reasonable, and when you ask them those reasonable questions and they can't answer them with reasonable answers, they may pause for a moment and reconsider. But they tend to be pretty rare these days, unfortunately.
And at this point, I will utter a language warning on the program.
Like no, honestly, it's, this idea of respectability, this idea of civility, this idea of unity, all of these words, decorum, who invented those words? Those words were invented by white men for the benefit of other white men in systems and institutions that were always designed to be for white men.
Now, do you think she realises that she just made the argument that white men are civilised and no one else is? Now, for the record, I don't believe that. Obviously, not all white men are civilised, and being white and male is not a requirement of being civilised. But I don't see any of those things as bad, and they're typically not the things used by dictators. However, they are things used by people who actually have arguments and have the intellectual capacity to make those arguments, because they're not afraid to have a conversation with people with different opinions. Once again, let me ask, which would you prefer? 1963 Dr. Martin Luther King or 1992 LA riots? Now, if you're like Mona and you prefer the 1992 LA riots version of discussion, I have to ask why. The only conclusion I can come to is one of two things. Either you're lacking the intellectual capacity to make an actual argument and have a debate without it devolving into a shouting match, or you don't believe in your arguments.
And they weren't designed for women like you and me and so many others. Like you said, people of colour and gender diverse people. They never imagined us in those spaces, and then we show up and we just ruin it for them.
Oh, I see. So social media was made by white men for white men alone, and now it's being invaded by women and people of colour, and the white men don't like it because it was designed just for the white males. All right. Do you think she has any idea how capitalism actually works? I mean, she's anti-capitalist for sure, but she doesn't seem to understand how it works. You see, social media makes its money through advertising, which means they want a lot of people to go to their sites and spend a lot of time there so they can see the ads. And generally speaking, they don't really care what sexuality you are, what gender you are, or what race you are, just so long as you see the ads.
And so those who abide by the system, and Barack Obama was part of the system and remains part of the system. I also disagree with his wife when she says when they go low, we go high. No, I fucking don't. If you go low, I'm going to come for you. So no, I do not have the luxury or the privilege to sit there and be civil with people who do not acknowledge my full humanity.
Which is pretty ironic, because she clearly doesn't see men, in particular white men, as human beings or having humanity.
I refuse, number one. Number two, there are so many voices who have found their platform on social media finally, after being the gatekeepers, refused to let us in for such a long time. I mean, I include myself because I'm kind of in and out. But there are people who have never had any platform. I'm thinking of young black feminists in the United States, Indigenous feminists in the United States and Canada, because I move back and forth between the US and Canada. There is one Indigenous woman in Canada who every day tweets about missing and killed Indigenous women in Canada. Nobody has bothered to find out what happened to them.
Now, it is true that there are missing Indigenous women in Canada. However, it is untrue that no one gives a shit about them. There is a lot of media attention, and the government is trying to figure out what has happened to them. Of course, the other thing that Mona leaves out is that 70% of the missing Indigenous population are in fact male. And the government is doing absolutely fucking nothing about that. Only the women. But somehow this is a sign of female oppression and women being second-class citizens. Absolutely fucking amazing.
In the United States, really incredibly successful campaigns have happened online because we refuse to be civil to those who don't recognize our humanity. So for those who say, be civil, for those who say, be polite, I have an entire chapter on the political importance of profanity. And I remind them of a Ugandan feminist called Dr. Stella Nyanzi, who is currently in prison in Uganda because she wrote a poem on Facebook wishing that the mother of the dictator of her country had poisoned him, that her birth canal had poisoned him during birth. And when she was taken to court and during her sentencing, she was videotaped in because she's known for her profanity. She stood there in the video, she took off her top, she jiggled her breasts, and she said, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. In court.
Mona, I talked to you about this. Okay, you're watching. That's three.
I disagree with Barack Obama. I agree with Stella Nyanzi.
You're watching Q&A live from Melbourne.
Well, I think that's all I can take for the moment. Now, I did say I was only going to do 2 max episodes on this, but I still have a lot of clips left, so I figure there will be a third. But I think we've learnt a lot today. I think this has been very enlightening. I think we've learnt that the white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy really needs to be destroyed, and the best way to do that is just to burn everything down. And then it will be replaced by a feminist utopia, in which mobs of women will hunt down random men who may or may not have been rapists. And they will be publicly executed because... we can't have the state killing people, can we? That would be wrong. That's the type of thing that needs to be done by mob justice. That's far, far better. Oh, but keep in mind, those mobs of women killing the accused male rapists, who may or may not have done the crime, that's justifiable, because it's women doing the violence, therefore it's justifiable violence. All sounds perfectly reasonable. I can't wait for the feminist uprising.
I go online exactly to tell people to f off. F the gender binary, yes. F you, f you, f you. Just f it all up and be free.
Hello, I'm Paul Barry. Welcome to Media Watch. And those fiery feminists on Q&A sure got the nation talking last week as they spoke up about smashing the patriarchy and violence against women. The show was loud, crass and at times compelling, leaving some viewers gasping with delight.
Brilliant Q&A.
This Q&A was one of the best.
We need more programs like this where women can voice their opinions without a man trying to talk over them.
But just as many were left screaming in anger and disgust.
The spewing of generalised violent overtures towards white men is nothing short of disgraceful.
You should be ashamed of yourselves.
And provoking undoubtedly the strongest reaction was the loud and irrepressible Egyptian-American writer Mona El-Tahawy, who, despite getting 2 language warnings, continued to swear her effing head off, leaving Fran Kelly to hoist the white flag.
We are trying to keep the language under control, but if you're offended by the profanity, maybe leave now.
But bad language was not the only problem, because Kelly's failure to wrangle the panel was more serious when it came to discussing whether violence should be used to bring about change.
I think violence is okay, because, like, if someone's trying to kill you, you know, there's no amount of, oh, but I'm really clever, you know, I'm really articulate. No amount of that is going to save you. So
it's a tricky
burn stuff.
But once again, it was El Tahawi who told viewers her mission was to destroy the, quote, white supremacist, capitalist, imperialist patriarchy who really crossed the line.
How long must we wait for men and boys to stop murdering us, to stop beating us, and to stop raping us? How many rapists must we kill? Not the state, because I disagree with the death penalty. I want women themselves. As a woman, I'm asking, how many rapists must we kill until men stop raping us?
And what was Fran Kelly's response to that? To say, you're surely not serious. You really want women to kill rapists? But no, she came back with...
So, Mona, them's fighting words. Spectator Australia is already saying Mona's promoting violence. That's what you're doing?
To the critics and many viewers, that's exactly what she was doing, which is why the ABC was soon making headlines.
Calls for Q&A host Fran Kelly to be sacked after allowing feminist panel to encourage women to murder all rapists.
Q&A hits a new low.
And from New York, Miranda Devine tweeted...
Why is the ABC giving a platform to unhinged people who advocate violence to achieve their aims? This is not normal discourse, it's fringe craziness.
Q&A viewers also complained in droves, with some 300 objecting to the calls for violence, bad language and lack of balance in the programme, which is why the show was sent off for editorial review. And by Friday, the criticism proved too much for ABC management, who ordered the episode to be taken down from iView, with MD David Anderson saying in a statement...
I can understand why some viewers found elements of this episode confronting or offensive.
And to be frank, so can we. But in my view, packing the panel with passionate and sometimes angry feminists was never a great idea, any more than it would have been to pack it all with unionists or Liberal politicians, especially with an audience that was cheering them on. And it put Fran Kelly in a really difficult position. As she told Media Watch,
I thought there would be a range of views on this in the panel. As it turned out, there was not a lot of disagreement from those I canvassed. It was my job, in a fast and furious discussion, to challenge Mona El Tahawi's assertion that killing men is the answer to violence against women, and I missed that opportunity.
Had Q&A put a couple of people on the panel who would take it up to Mona, it could have been an even more fiery show, and there would have been no reason to complain. But this was like the flip side of watching Sky After Dark, which Media Watch goes after regularly for failing to challenge extreme or crazy views. A fact the Sky's Paul Murray duly noted.
You know, think about it. Adam Giles, Rowan Dean, me, Andrew Bolt, you know, take your pick, have all been in the shit because we don't push back. It was completely uncontested. Uncontested.
A bit more pushback was what Q&A needed. But what about the ABC's decision to take the programme down, which appears to have been driven, if not actually taken, by the chair, Ida Buttrose, who told The Australian,
"We won't be repeating the programme. The plan is to take it off."
In my opinion, that was a massive overreaction and a real failure of nerve. Whatever the problems with the episode, it's Q&A's job to be confronting and at times offensive, and it's ABC management's job to defend its right to be so. It'll end up being a bloody boring programme if they don't. And it seems there are now as many complaints about the episode being taken down. And one of the panellists, Hannah Asafiri, who certainly does not advocate violence, told us today,
I find it disappointing that the ABC didn't stand by women on the show. This was an important opportunity for women to vent their fury at the epidemic of violence against them.
Tage nach Monitor.